and welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us today. As always, we enjoy the time that we get to spend with you every week, bringing some wonderful education and information into your home. Today, we are very happy to be joined by Martha Alderman, and she is the Central Region Manager for the Arizona Department of Veterans Services. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Pleasure to have you, and I know that you have some great information to share with our viewers that hopefully, as Martha shares a little bit about herself and her history, I would suggest grabbing a piece of paper really quick, because if you are a veteran or a senior or have had anything to do with the military, I think that you're going to want to take some notes because you have some wonderful information to share. But before we get started in that, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourself and kind of your history and what you're doing here and how long you've been with the veterans.
Okay. Well, I'm a native of Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, born in what used to be called Good Sam. They've just recently changed the name, so no longer Good Sam. But I enlisted in the Navy in '75. I retired in '99, came back to Arizona because my mother and sister were here. Went to ASU West, graduated in '03. 2 weeks later, came to work for the state of Arizona in the job I'm now in. Actually, I started out as a counselor, got promoted a couple of times. Now I'm the manager. So it's almost 12 years.
Wow.
And almost all of my counselors almost everybody that works there is a veteran. And we assist our fellow veterans in knowing what benefits they might be eligible for and then pursuit of those benefits.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you for your service.
My pleasure.
And also thank you for helping our other veterans, because I know that there is a lot of resources out there for our veterans, many of which are not aware of any or most of the benefits that they can receive. Do you find that to be an accurate statement, working with veterans? Yes.
Unfortunately, yes. There's a lot of folks out there who are ignorant for whatever reason of what they might be entitled to, or they get misinformation, they have false expectations, but mostly they just don't know what they might be eligible for. They don't know how to start. They don't know, who do I ask? Where do I go for assistance? And sometimes they talk to somebody down at the local VFW or DAV or golf course or whatever, and fortunately a lot of them get steered in our directions. So we can eventually, and through one means or another, we can enlighten them as to what they might be eligible for and then how to go about it, and we help them from start to finish.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking time away from that today to be here with us to share with our viewing audience. So hopefully some people who are not aware of their benefits or about the VA will learn today. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much at home for watching. And today we are speaking about seniors, and our first topic is veterans health care, specifically VA health care. For people that maybe have never heard of the VA, that sounds crazy, but I'm sure that there's people out there, and I'm sure you've ran across it, that have never heard of the VA. What is the VA?
Well, the VA is actually kind of a misnomer. It's really the Department of Veterans Affairs, but it used to be the Veterans Administration. But it is the second largest federal government agency. Department of Defense is the biggest. But the VA, because we all call it that, has an education division, it has a healthcare administration, and it has a benefits administration.
Wow.
Those are the biggies. And the healthcare administration is just that. It is its own division that just provides health care to veterans, not to their families, not to their spouses, but for veterans. There are 8 categories of entitlement. There's an enrollment process. Certain people may not be eligible for it because they didn't serve enough time on active duty, or the character of their discharge, or maybe their income is too great if they aren't service connected for disabilities. But if you don't know that you aren't eligible, might as well apply and find out. The regulations have changed a lot over the years. The income ceiling for the copay groups has inched up significantly in the past decade or so. So people who weren't eligible a few years ago now are eligible. If you're service connected for a disability, which means something happened to you while you were on active duty, either you were diagnosed with a disease or you were injured and you have residuals of that injury, there's certain priority groups for those folks. If you're on VA pension, which is what we're going to talk about next, there's a certain category just for folks on pension. And there are 2 copay categories for folks that don't meet the other criteria, but they still have the requisite service and meet the income ceiling. And they do have copays, It's not all free. It's free for some veterans, but not all veterans. It just depends on so many things. The application process is really quite easy. It's a 1010 EZ. You can go online and get one. You can call my office. We'll mail you one. You can go to the VA hospital, the Carl T. Hayden, and get one. It's very easy to apply.
And the VA hospital is just down here in Phoenix on Central?
650 East Indian School Road. Yep,
so
between 3rd Street and 7th Street.
Okay, and so it's right there, and so you can just go in there and ask questions, and you'll be there. Is that where you're at? And
No, my office is in the VA regional office, which is at 3333 North Central.
Okay.
I work with the Veterans Benefits Administration more closely than I do healthcare, but we get a lot of questions about healthcare eligibility and how do I enroll. And if they're already in our office, we tell them to just drive 4 or 5 blocks right up the street, go to the eligibility and enrollment office right inside the hospital, just off of 3rd Street, fill out an application, and within a few weeks they'll know if they're eligible.
And so, I mean, is there pretty general guidelines of who's eligible? Is it just someone who has served in the military?
Well, like I said, there are 8 priority groups, the
Okay.
VA calls them, and which one you get put into depends on your particular situation.
Okay.
If you're not service connected for anything and you're not on VA pension, you're going to be most likely in 7 or 8. Those are the 2 copay categories. If you're service connected at a particular percent, you're in a certain category. If you're service connected at 60% or greater, you're in priority group 1. If you're on pension, I'm sorry, I cannot remember the priority group, but that's a particular one for them. And folks on pension have no payments associated with health care. Folks in priority group 1 have no co-payments associated with their health care, to include hospitalization.
Wow.
But the other ones will have a copay to a varying degree, depends on which priority group you are in, but they're very low copays. And there's also a pharmacy at VA Healthcare. They only fill prescriptions written by VA doctors. A common misconception is that you can bring a civilian prescription into VA and have them fill it. You can't. You have to be enrolled in VA Healthcare. You have to be seen by a VA doctor, and that doctor has to write you a prescription, and then it can be filled by VA Healthcare.
And so to be seen in the VA hospital, do you have to be a member of VA benefits, or can any veteran go in there to get service?
You have to enroll.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to make the application for enrollment, that 1010 EZ form. And you provide a copy of your discharge document, which is a DD-214, to demonstrate that you had adequate and honorable service.
And so once you're enrolled in VA healthcare benefits, can you only go to the VA hospitals, or does that extend to more general?
You can. I'm retired from the service, so I have something called TRICARE, which I pay for because I have TRICARE Prime. I can go out to Luke Air Force Base. And my husband, who is a dependent, I like that, he uses a private physician who accepts TRICARE. So I have the option of using both. Folks who are on Medicare have the option of going to another provider or using VA. Folks who have private insurance have the option of using a combination, so you're not limited.
Okay, and so it's basically like if someone's in network, if you had a private insurance provider, it's just making sure that they accept those benefits is essentially.
Well, VA Healthcare does not pay another provider.
Okay, so that is only the VA hospital.
Right.
Okay.
If you're enrolled in VA Healthcare, you get that free care or whatever your copay is through VA Healthcare.
Okay.
Now, there is a big change coming about right now with the Veterans Choice Program. Don't know if you've heard of that or not. It has to do with where do you live in relation to where the nearest VA facility is. It used to be 40 miles as the crow flies, but somebody finally figured out we don't have wings, so let's do it road miles. So that, I don't think it is passed yet, but it probably will. So if you're either over 40 miles away from a facility that you're eligible to go to, or if you can't get an appointment that you need within 30 days, then the VA is contracting with private providers.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And the VA would pay. But it's not something that you can just go to a private provider and say, send the bill to VA. It doesn't work that way.
Yes, well, and that's helpful to people that aren't able to get there, that do live too far.
Oh, I love this change.
That's wonderful for our veterans, and especially maybe our older veterans that don't have the ability to drive as far, to get as far, or can't get in, or need to see someone. So that's wonderful.
Right, and VA doesn't provide transportation, unfortunately. Now the DAV, which is another service organization, they're the second largest in the nation. They provide transportation to the VA hospital, but it's limited. There is a range. You know, if you live too far away, they still can't come get you. And of course, you can't always get picked up in a timely fashion, and sometimes you have to wait all day for the other people to get back. But yeah, transportation is a barrier, as is the time lag. So this Veterans Choice is a way to alleviate both of those obstacles.
What a wonderful implementation. That's great. And once that passes, I'm sure that'll benefit a lot of veterans. So that's great.
Absolutely.
So people are not automatically enrolled in this whenever they're in the military then?
No. A lot of folks think that I'm a veteran, so I can just go to the VA if I want to, but that is not the case. But if you are service-connected for something, that does guarantee you VA health care, at least for the condition for which you're service-connected. It puts you into one of the priority groups depending on your percentage of disability.
And by service-connected, you mean active duty then? You're somehow active with the military at that point in some branch or capacity?
No, VA healthcare is only for veterans. That means you have separated from active duty. Service connection means you have a disability that is related to your service. And you have to make a claim to the Department of Veterans Affairs to get that service connection. And then if it's significant to where it's called compensable, then you also get a monetary payment, depending on whether you're 10%, 90%, 100%. But whatever condition you're service-connected for, as a result of making that claim and getting that decision, then you get free health care at least for that condition.
Okay, that makes wonderful sense. So if, in other words, if you were injured, it's almost in essence like in the civilian world, workman's compensation. If you are hurt for that, then you're going to be taken care of for that.
And it's not just money, but it's money and health care.
Okay. Yep. And that's wonderful. They're taking care of our veterans that way. And just as a last question, can a veteran use VA health care and another insurance or Medicare? Are those something that can be used together?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like I was saying, I use my TRICARE. You know, that means I pay for that, so I can go out to Luke, or I could have a private provider if I wanted. But yes, you can have, VA will bill your insurance company if you have another insurance provider. They will bill, they don't bill Medicare, but they will bill Blue Cross or Cigna or whatever. And that makes sense because it is a huge healthcare administration. They need operating money. So we hear a lot in the news about, you know, why there are so many problems with VA healthcare, and there have been some lately, but it is huge. Anytime you have an agency that is that big, there will be some problems.
Of course.
And an awful lot of it has to do with not enough money to have an adequate staff of doctors or an adequate staff of people to answer phones and make appointments. So anytime the VA can recoup from your insurance provider, it makes sense.
And if there's a premium being paid, why wouldn't you utilize that anyways? So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I appreciate this first segment. Has been wonderful. I feel like there's so many more questions I could even ask you.
I know.
And I'm
we
sure
could talk for an hour about this probably.
Probably are like, oh my goodness, I have this and this and this. And I know that the website azdvs.gov, people can go to that and find these resources, correct?
Yes, they can. And they can also go directly to the va.gov.
It's just va.gov.
Right. That's for the federal government, Department of Veterans Affairs, va.gov. And you can get information on compensation and health care and burial and education and just everything. But if you want a service organization to assist you with your claim, well, I'm kind of prejudiced, I suppose, but I think we're the best.
Wonderful. Well, from the information you shared and your knowledge, I'm sure that a lot of people would agree. So thank you so much, Martha. I appreciate you joining us for this first segment. And thank you so much at home for staying with us. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short message.
When you're dying, what will it be like? You think you may know until you see what hospice can do. Expert loving care that enables more cherished moments, more smiles, maybe one more dance. Turns out when you're dying, there's more living to do. these families discovered what hospice is. See what's possible at momentsoflife.org. Optum Palliative and Hospice Care is a local supporter of this campaign.
Hello and welcome back to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose. So happy you decided to stay with us. If you just happen to be joining us, today we are joined by Martha Alderman, and she is the Central Region Manager for Arizona Department of Veteran Services. Thank you so much for staying with us, Martha.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you. Phenomenal information in our first segment about veterans health care. And now we're going to be speaking all about veterans pensions. What are veterans pensions?
We tend to think of pension as something that you get when you retire,
yes,
but that's not what it means in the VA vernacular. Those of us who are retired from the service do get something from the branch of service, but we call it retired pay. Pension is something that was started, my goodness, a couple hundred years ago. It is a financial benefit, and it is limited to veterans who served on active duty during a period of war, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, and the current Gulf War, and they meet certain income restrictions. There's also a survivor pension for the unremarried spouses, unremarried surviving spouses, and dependent children of those veterans who served on active duty during a period of war. But they all have an income ceiling. The purpose of the pension is to, well, quite frankly, boost the income for folks who are very low income. And it is generally for folks who are older. If a veteran is age 65 or older, if he or she is just below the ceiling, it's what we call a statutory grant. They submit the claim, the VA double checks to see what his or her income is. It's below the ceiling, the VA pays the difference to bring their combined income up to the ceiling. If they are in a nursing home or assisted living, or if they have an in-home care provider because they're significantly disabled, the income ceiling goes up, and it goes up significantly. And if a veteran is paying for a care provider or a care home, whatever they pay reduces their countable income. And a married veteran right now who is in that situation, the benefit they can get is over $2,000 a month.
Wow.
And this is tax-free money from the federal government. And how often do we hear of a genuine tax-free, no-strings program, from the federal government? And like I said, it's strictly for veterans who served during a period of war.
Okay, and so this is also, so who is eligible then for VA pension? I mean, is this only low income? Is this, what is the eligibility requirements?
Well, sometimes you start out with somebody who has a fairly significant income. You might find a veteran who's making $4,500 a month. And initially, when you first look at it, you see that person is well over the income ceiling. However, if that veteran is disabled, and he or she is, let's say they're paying a caregiver $3,000 a month, or they're in a care facility for $4,000 a month, it reduces their countable income dollar for dollar by whatever they're paying. And then their adjusted income is compared to the ceiling. And however much it is now under the ceiling, that's what the VA will pay them. So we could have somebody making $4,000 or $5,000 a month and still qualify for up to $2,000. I think it's $2,120 a month for a married veteran because of their recurring medical expense for that long-term care. And
you had mentioned that earlier when we were talking about health care that there's a specific area for pension for people who are in VA pensions for health care. So is that something then that would combine together and maybe they could begin to utilize the VA health care?
Well, yeah, they might not have qualified for VA health care prior to going on pension because there is an income criteria for health care as well. But if they are granted pension benefits, that automatically entitles the veteran, not the spouse, unfortunately, but just the veteran, to free VA health care, which includes doctor visits, prescriptions, even hospitalization if they need it.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yep.
And so as far as the pension, the only person who is eligible is the veteran, but the spouse would benefit if they were married.
Well, an unremarried surviving spouse, so widows and widowers, and if there are minor children. And they still have to be the survivor of that veteran who served on active duty during a period of war. And there's still an income ceiling. The income ceiling for the spouse is about half of that for a veteran. And that makes sense because that isn't the person that's served. But still, I think it's a great, wonderful program that the VA is still caring for the veteran, his widow and orphan. That's how President Lincoln put it all those years ago, because he or she, that veteran, served their country during a period of war.
And so is this someone who has, is there a requirement on how long they've had to have been married? Does this have to be an original spouse? How does that work?
An original spouse, I like that. It has to be the last spouse.
Okay.
A marriage that has ended in divorce does away with all benefit entitlements for the person who would have been the surviving spouse, because they no longer are. They're now just a former spouse. But if they were married at the time of death, typically they do have to have been married for a year or have had a child with that veteran or be expecting one. We don't see a lot of young veterans, so we don't see too many who are, you know, newly married or expecting or even have minor children. And thank goodness for that. Thank goodness not so many of our veterans are that disabled or that poor at a very young age.
Yes.
That is so disheartening, to see someone in that situation. But every once in a while, we do find someone like that, and maybe it is a second spouse. The veteran has remarried, and sometimes they marry a younger person, and it's nice to know that that benefit is there, but they cannot remarry and continue that benefit. And like I said, they do have to have been widowed by the veteran, it can't end in divorce.
Okay, and so that's wonderful that they are taking care of the widow and the orphan, like you said.
I agree.
And because to lose someone is difficult enough, and if you're already low income and struggling, then to get that added on top, I can imagine would be very burdensome. So how does a claimant apply for a pension?
Well, the best way, frankly, is to call us, and we will ask the appropriate questions. You know, when did the veteran serve? What was the character of discharge? And then what is your income? There's also a consideration of net worth. Right now, the VA doesn't have any kind of a absolute net worth ceiling, and they also don't have a look back on your net worth. So they do it on a case-by-case basis. And the younger a claimant is, the more net worth will be allowed before they will have to deny citing sufficient net worth. But if someone has, let's say, $250,000 in the bank, well, they may be low income, but they still have significant means, so they're not going to be eligible for this program either. But most of our folks are both low income and minimal assets.
Okay, and so so really income and net worth are going to be the biggest factors.
And once you get that initial one is, when did the veteran serve? If that criteria is not met, there are no exceptions for peacetime veterans or veterans who didn't have adequate service.
And so being a wartime veteran though, and this is something, would they have had to have been deployed to that place? So they just had to be in the service during the time of war.
They had to be on active duty.
Okay, so if it were World War II, but they were working back here in the States in intelligence or something, then they still would qualify, even though they weren't deployed overseas. Okay. And so I'm sure that's a question that people wonder.
Oh, absolutely. I wasn't in the war. My husband wasn't in the war, whatever. Oh, immaterial. Was he or she or you on active duty for 1 day during a period of war?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very generous.
That's very generous and wonderful, and I think we should take care of our veterans.
Me
so that
too.
is wonderful. Does a claimant need a lawyer to apply?
There are lawyers out there who will charge money to help you do this, and sometimes they combine it with estate planning to maybe circumvent the net worth, but they also will combine their services with an application for Medicaid, which is called All-Tex in Arizona. And that was something I wanted to talk about real quickly, and we'll get to that in a few seconds, but you don't need a lawyer. It is not that complicated.
Okay.
A veteran or surviving spouse should never have to put out a penny to anyone to get help with this. That's why organizations such as mine exist, and we are a state government agency. We're accredited with the VA. We have background checks, fingerprints, because when you're making an application for pension or for compensation either, you have to divulge all of your personal identification information to including your banking information, because the VA pays through direct deposit.
Okay.
So most people would feel more comfortable giving that information to someone like myself, you know, who's a government employee and has the background check, than to just some Joe off the street, you know, who says, oh, I can do this for you and I can cut through the red tape and make it happen faster. That is not true. My folks are very well trained. We know what forms, what documents, how to make sure the forms are complete and accurate. And we liaise directly with the Pension Management Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. If there's ever a problem, we are the point of contact between the claimant and the Pension Management Center.
Well, and that's very important, especially for our viewers who are seniors and who may get phone calls or mailers or something soliciting those services. That's not necessary, and they don't need to spend their money to gain these benefits.
Yes.
You are there as a state organization that is there to help these people. So all they need to do is call you.
Yes.
All they need to do is go to your website.
Yes.
And that is a wonderful, wonderful resource. And I wish that we had time to continue in this, because I know that there's so much more that we could cover. But again, your website is azdvs.gov, and then you said they can also find resources at va.gov.
va.gov for general information, but they won't get the personal one-on-one help that my counselors will give. And the state of Arizona, our service organization, we have offices all around the state. And from our website, you can get a phone number and an address of every single one of our offices.
Wonderful. Well, Martha, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and sharing such wonderful information that will help our veterans. And thank you for all you do for our veterans. So
my pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching Joy in Our Town. It's always such a pleasure to join you every week in your home. We look forward to seeing you next week. I hope that this has been informational and helpful to you. Have a great day.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, Post Office Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.